connection between our success, our business models as a sector, and these negative environmental impacts. And we did a big piece of work across our network, consulting with many stakeholders from around the world. And we came up with a number of levers of change. If you could bring the next slide up, we'll see them. These are things that we believe need to be addressed in tandem, in parallel, to shift the dial, to address those impacts from the sector. So it starts with collaboration. It starts with bringing the industry together. This is a systemic problem, a systemic solution, a systemic approach. So bringing the whole industry together to work and move forwards in parallel is really critical. And then obviously all of the things that you see on the slide below that. We need awareness raising, communication. We need a big investment in innovation, capacity building, and importantly, we need the regulation to move the mass market. We can't just rely on the leaders here. We'll be hearing from some of those leaders shortly, but it's not enough. We need the mainstream to move, and that's where regulation is really key. And we'll be talking particularly about that this afternoon, how policy can drive this forward. And the project that I'm speaking about now, I want to present to you, Building Life, is really built around these levers of change. So we didn't just publish a report. We said, okay, how can we as a network contribute to this? How can we take this forward? And so Building Life is addressing each of these. And if you could bring the next slide up, please, Roland-Jan. We've brought together 10 of our member councils across Europe. You can see them in a moment. You'll see them on the map. Just wait for that. There we go. So these are the 10 countries that are participating in the project, and each of those countries is working on a national roadmap for the total decarbonisation of the sector. Each of them starting at different points. So we recognise that the roadmaps will look different, but they're all working on these roadmaps. And we believe this is a really powerful tool to drive industry action, to build a common vision across the sector of who needs to do what and by when. And we're also working at the European level on a European policy roadmap, again, bringing together representatives, associations from across the sector. Some of you are probably part of that work already, designing what we believe should be the roadmap for EU policy to address these impacts from the construction sector. And we're also bringing national governments together in a governments working group, and we've updated our net zero carbon buildings commitment to include the whole life cycle, embodied and operational carbon. And I'll just finish by giving a couple of examples of what's happening in the national work that the National Green Building Councils are leading. So the next slide shows the first roadmap was already launched a few weeks ago, just before the summer. The Polish Green Building Council launched their roadmap together with the EBRD, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, supported this work. And here, you obviously won't be able to read the detail, but it just gives you a sense of how this roadmap identifies across the different actors in the value chain what needs to happen when for the sector to move forward together on this agenda. And what's really key is this isn't then just about industry action, but it becomes an advocacy tool. And our national councils are meeting with member state government representatives to bring this vision to them and to say, look, the industry is ready. We've identified what the roadmap looks like, and now we need the policy in place to help drive mainstream action on this. And importantly, in the discussion around policy, obviously this year is really a really key opportunity, both at a global level and European level. And the next slide shows a couple of examples of what we're doing at COP. We're very involved in the Built Environment Day at COP in Glasgow, but it already started in Milan with the pre-COP, where we had a presentation, a big event organized by GBC Italia, a speech from the Vice President of the European Parliament, and that work is now being taken forward into the Built Environment Day at COP in Glasgow, where we'll be showcasing the UK's roadmap will be launched there. So do look out for that. And on the EU, we have the EPBD, the EED, the EU taxonomy, really key pieces of EU policy landscape that are being worked on this year. So this is a really fantastic opportunity to see those policies address whole life carbon and for us to move forwards. And so the final slide just sort of summarizes our call to action, if you like, for policymakers at all levels. We want to see an ambitious policy on whole life carbon, whether we're talking to the European level, the member state level, or even at a global level. So I'm looking forward to the discussion this afternoon, just to give you a flavour of what we're doing, and hopefully we'll be hearing more about what some of the industry actors are doing and what some of the policy, the political leaders are doing as well. So thank you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Sirpa, we started without you, but I knew you were going to join us very, very shortly. So if you just heard Stephen Richardson, who is, as you know, the Europe Director for the World Green Building Council, and I'm going to hand it over to you to give the floor to Niels, who I saw had also joined us in the meantime.
Oh, very good. Then I'll pass the word for Niels. I'm sorry about this. I was just negotiating the pay transparency to improve the gender issue, women's position on there. So that's why, sorry, couldn't start on punctual. Maybe I'll give first the word to Niels, and then I'll sort of add a couple of points myself. On the basis of the very interesting presentation of Stefan. So Niels, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sirpa. I hope you can hear me. Do I go through?
Yes, you do.
I assume so. Great. All right. So anyway, it sounds like an important meeting you attended. So excuses well received from my part anyway. I think I would like to tell you something about buildings, obviously, and the life cycle approaches to buildings. My background here is that I am negotiating the implementation report on the Buildings Directive right now. And as you know, there will be a new Buildings Directive, Energy Performance in Buildings Directive, coming from the Commission this December. Then I'm also rapporteur on the Energy Efficiency Directive, which of course is also relevant in this context. I think the climate law that we adopted earlier this year in the European institutions in the EU is the world's most important climate law, because I think that the EU has a potential to wield influence above our weight class and outside our borders as well. We only emit 8% of the world's 9% of the world's greenhouse gases in Europe. So our Fit for 55 package is meant to reduce emissions in Europe, but of course also inspire greenhouse gas mitigation, climate change mitigation outside Europe. And of course, buildings play a key role in that effort. And here I also hope that we can take the lead in Europe when it comes to reducing greenhouse gas emissions from buildings that right now are responsible for 40% of our energy consumption and 36% of total CO2 emissions. We need buildings, office buildings, public buildings, governance buildings like the one I'm sitting in, and I think that Sirpa is sitting in too in Strasbourg. And one estimate says, I read the Bill Gates book on climate change that some of you maybe have also read, and he refers to an estimate saying that the world will add 2 trillion square feet of buildings by 2060. That is the same as one new New York City, another New York City every month for the next 40 years. So a new New York City every month. That's a lot of buildings, obviously. And I think in Europe we should lead the way, making sure that these buildings have a high energy performance and are constructed with sustainable materials and have a life cycle approach. That is a crucial part of our climate policy. And by the way, it's also a crucial part of our policy to make sure that we become energy self-sufficient. We all know that we are in the middle of an energy crisis with prices going up, and 31 million people in Europe have difficulties heating their buildings as it is, well, actually before, in 2019, before the energy crisis. So 31 million people, that number has risen, obviously, with the energy crisis. That is also a reason why we need energy sustainable buildings. So in December, as you know, the Commission will present a revised energy performance of buildings directive. And currently we're working on the implementation report, which assesses comments on the member states' long-term renovation strategies. And here, I think we will reach a conclusion. We're in the negotiations right now, but I think we will reach a conclusion stating that there's certainly room for improvement. The renovation strategies of member states vary very much in quality, and I think that the most important thing to say is that the renovation rate is way too low. We know that we need a renovation rate of around 3% of building stock in Europe to reach the climate targets that we have. But right now the renovation rate is only 1%. So we need to make sure that we have some renovation strategies that boost the renovation rate. And that is what I think we should say in this report also. And we also, I mean, the good thing that it's not a good thing that we are not far enough when it comes to renovating, but it also gives us an opportunity to strengthen the life cycle approach when we do renovate the buildings. I think that the life cycle approach is important, and the possibilities for circularity in the future depends on how these renovations are conducted, which materials we choose, and how they are assembled. So already when designing the materials needed for the buildings, we should take into account their recyclability. We should recycle construction products and waste. Maintenance and construction products, both new and recycled, should not contain hazardous substances. And the recycling of materials, I think, can also have a positive impact on energy consumption, as manufacturing primary construction products normally requires more energy than using recycled materials. So we must really maximize the reuse, recycling, the recuperation of materials in these long-term strategies. And I think we should say that, and I think we will say that in our report. And I think, you know, that's also a way for us to push the Commission when making the new directive, which is due for December, to put some firm demands in that new legislation when it comes to a life cycle approach of buildings. Energy is also a crucial part of the buildings, obviously, and I think here we can also think in a life cycle approach. We need to continue to decarbonize the heating and cooling sector, and do this with a focus on the housing sector's ability to help us also to store energy when we produce energy from renewable sources. We have a problem with storage today, but I think the housing sector and the heating systems and the cooling systems of the housing sectors can help us also in storing and handling fluctuations in the energy system. And I think we should think that into our building strategies. Yes, and I think when we make buildings, yeah, we have to think about all these things on how and how to also reuse the materials, but perhaps even reuse the buildings when they're not fit for purpose anymore. I was told that, and I don't know if this is true, but I will tell you anyway, that the European Parliament in Brussels was actually made so that it could be a hotel. If we ever get tired of the European Parliament, it could be used as a hotel. I don't hope that we will get tired of the European Parliament, but who knows? I mean, thinking in these terms, being able to reuse buildings for other purposes could perhaps also be a strategy in the life cycle approach to buildings. If one chooses that strategy, I think we should, however, do it in a more clever way than the European Parliament is an example of, because I think we have in all offices we have actually showers and bathrooms, but the showers don't work, and it's a waste of space actually. So the European Parliament, maybe the idea was good, but the construction is not the best. Okay, I think that is what I would have to say. I think it is important for the next Energy Performance in Buildings Directive to really put some firm demands on these issues when it comes to the life cycle approach to buildings and recycling of materials and energy. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
You're on mute, Sirpa.
Thank you, Niels, and very many points that I would like to comment. Not that I disagree, but I strongly agree with you. But I'll come back maybe not to keep you others wait too long on those points later on, but I'll just sort of lay down a couple of the challenges right now. One is that I guess all of us in the call knows that it is about half of the task what is to be shouldered by buildings and construction. Half of the material consumption, and a vast deal of this material do have a significant impact on biodiversity and ecosystems also. And 40% about the CO2 emissions. So either this whole thing of a Green Deal and sustainability quite literally raises or falls with construction and buildings. And there we do have the big challenge. And the challenge in four sort of a question is, how do we regulate it effectively? Personally, I've been very much in favor to change this set of directives to one bigger directive called sustainable buildings, because now we have overlapping demands a bit in fire safety, in technical safety, in some other fields of directions of buildings, and I think that we should put it all in the same basket. Secondly, I would like to raise our ambition level quite substantially from the Commission, and I know Niels is working very hard on this, but we would need to have this 2050 sustainable buildings backcasting approach. And that would mean that the new buildings would really need to be modular we all have been playing with our Legos when we were kids. So basically, everything should be as far as possible reusable, and that means quite a lot on regulation and standards and how you design the different elements so that you do not need to drill them on filled with holes when you have a changes in housing, or when you need to either change the concept of the housing or the size of the housing, be it then industrial or commercial or private living conditions. Then, of course, this is the first initial steps, what we could hear already from Stefan about what we have in taxonomy. But the taxonomy really would need to incentivize for this kind of a reusable, circular, energy efficient, with very good air quality, indoor air quality buildings with as little chemicalization as possible. And then the big one, where I hope a lot of money and the Parliament's efforts go, is exactly, and this was mentioned by Niels already, the point of renovation wave. While we are constructing this size of a New York, new buildings on the planet, the reality is that in Europe, 80% of the buildings that are going to be in place on 2050 are there already. So it is very much a question, how do we renovate, not to be slightly better, but to meet up the standards to stand alone for 30 or 50 years from now, and how to spend that money wisely, and how to set the regulation ambition level high enough. And what I mean by this is that the industries are saying, with very good reason quite often, the point that the legislation is short-sighted and it doesn't give adequate incentives. And it doesn't make a lot of sense that we sort of upgrade our energy efficiency requirements every 5 to 10 years with 5 or 10%. We actually should set the standard and a longer timetable than to feel that both in renovated and existing buildings. But this is a lot. But there's a lot of happening, and this is a very steep learning curve for us politicians, and this is the point why we are today together to learn from you. And I'm very happy to turn the floor to our next speaker, but I'm still very intimidated to mention your name, as you know, Miriam, because I always do some mispronunciation on Trijewska. One of these days I get it right, but very happy to have you with us, and please, the floor is yours to look what Target is doing on these issues, and what do you expect from policymakers. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sirpa. So I'm Miriam Trijewska, and I'm Sustainability and Public Affairs Director for EMEA at Target. I joined Target 5 years ago after several experiences in quality, environment, sustainability, and public affairs, especially in the built environment. This allowed me to work already a few years ago on EPBD, indoor environment quality, and today on cradle-to-cradle eco-design of construction product, circular economy, and extended producer responsibility scheme development. I'm really pleased and honored to be part of this GlobeEU and World Green Building Council event. And thank you again, Sirpa, Niels, and Stefan, for making it possible. So as you may know, Target is an international player in the floor covering industry with a global reach. Every day, more than 12,000 employees deliver linoleum, vinyl, carpet, or wood floor coverings quite everywhere we live, play, heal, or learn. So with this sort of scale, Target can really be a driving force for changing the way we operate and make a positive impact, especially when it comes to today's topic from shifting to a whole life carbon approach for sustainable buildings. Target is known for its commitment for shifting towards a circular economy. For many years, we have integrated a comprehensive eco-design approach based on cradle-to-cradle principles. We have developed our own restart programs for collection and recycling of products after their end of life in closed-loop systems. Moreover, we are addressing the carbon footprint reduction by using more recycled materials. The positive impact for decarbonizing is measurable. And in 2020, we avoided 253,000 tons of CO2 emissions globally by the use of 127,000 tons of secondary raw materials. From 13% today, we aim at increasing their share to 30% in 2030. For vinyl products, if we think about recycling, each ton of vinyl recycled saves 2 tons of CO2 emission. This makes the mechanical recycling of vinyl a low carbon technology for the circular economy already available today. Our areas of development look into the use of biosource solutions in addition to our historical linoleum or wood flooring range. Exploring alternative solutions within our supply chains, we have recently launched a vinyl product range using waste from biomass instead of oil. This lowers the greenhouse gas emissions over the entire product life cycle by 60%. This is really significant in our industry. This is a promising path for us to reduce our environmental impact and solve resource scarcity while reducing dramatically the building embodied carbon, which is indeed more and more a concern for our customers. Target believes collaboration and public authorities play a key role in shaping our low carbon and circular society in the built environment. Creating a level playing field and regulatory stimulating environment for innovation and investment to accelerating the transition to a low carbon and circular economy is not easy. It is clear that more harmonization is needed between European regulations and national initiatives, and rewarding innovation, supporting the development of companies having integrated low carbon and circular economy in their business models is fundamental. So this brings me to an example which is indeed a case for a Target as we digged into the project for the taxonomy criteria on circular economy. So we are concerned about the current project set of criteria on circular economy, as it is not identifying clearly circular activities as eligible. The setup is still based on activity NACE codes, classification, and identification of priority sectors. I have nothing to say against promoting more sustainable activities for those heavy-duty industries, but this is definitively excluding players as Target, which are not belonging to heavy-duty industries, even in the construction sectors. We are a producer of construction products, but we are not part of the framework today. So we see this as a missed opportunity and unfair system, literally punishing the early movers at risk for being excluded from green finance. So this is my concern today because I spent a lot of time this summer investigating the expert group report, and we hope at Target, and I would really appreciate to have more connected people on this topic, that a comprehensive solution can be found, for the delegated act development that should be enforced in 2022 by the European policymakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. And unfortunately, you are not the only one taking the note of the taxonomy's faults in the case that it can't recognize companies that are green or greening their way if they are not in very substantial role on here. And I've got quite a number of contacts in this regard. And let's hope that in the next process of reviewing them, we could do it. But I do share your point, and I understand that it's a long wait, and preferably one would get the benefits earlier on that and the rewards that should be gotten there. Then we'll move up to Roy Antink from Stora Enso. What is Stora Enso doing on this subject, and what are your expectations on policymakers, and knowing that you do a lot of in elements and wood, very excited to hear what are your advice for the next steps on sustainable and green buildings.
Good. And instead of Roy, you have Johanna today from Stora Enso. So my name is Johanna.
So I was thinking so, but I thought that there might be a
No
change or
worries.
something. Johanna,
We have
welcome.
plenty of experts on this field, and then we kind of take always a draw who gets to join, and today I won. So thank you very much for the invitation, and we are happy to take part in this discussion. So my name is Johanna Pirinen, I'm heading sustainability in wood products division at Stora Enso. Roy is working with our group sustainability. So we are both on the field. But maybe Stora Enso is not so familiar, so shortly about us. We are a global provider of renewable solutions in biomaterials, packaging materials, paper, and then wooden construction. We are listed in Helsinki and Stockholm, so Scandinavia in that sense. And then you might be interested that we are globally over 23,000 people, and out of these 18,000 working in EU area. And then maybe one fact about us, we are one of the world's largest private forest owners, and of course committed to sustainable forestry. So really paying attention to biodiversity and replace each harvested tree with at least 3 new seedlings as a foundation for everything we do. And then good to take part in this good constructive dialogue today. So very much liking to be the partner for policymakers also in the dialogue and discussion. And we want to, of course, chip in and make Green Deal's vision a reality. It's a big challenge for all of us. So then if I would tell you a little bit about the wood products division that I represent. So we have the building solutions made available for construction sector at the moment. So mass timber elements that can be utilized in construction. In addition, we also have a really classical sawn timber products that we bring to the market. And we've been talking about emissions here, but maybe I would like to kind of remind the audience about the whole life carbon when we think about the building sector and the whole life carbon. So there are kind of 2 elements in that. It's the embodied carbon that happens from the construction materials and the construction process itself. And then, of course, the operational emissions that happen during the use of the building, such as heating and lighting and maintenance. So embodied emissions and then the operational emissions when we talk about the whole life carbon. And when we think from wood products Stora Enso perspective, we really have this solution that can significantly cut the embodied carbon part of building sector. When trees grow, they absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, And then that carbon is stored in the material. So when we have the mass timber element that actually acts as a carbon storage during the building's lifetime, so decades, basically. If I take an example, we have a 14-story student housing building in Joensuu in Finland. And that basically has stored 1,600 tons of carbon already in it. And maybe a few little fun facts of that. What are the kind of other benefits of building with wood? It's the faster construction and less transportation, actually. So this Joensuu case, there has been a full life cycle analysis and studies, calculations of it. But it meant also fewer trucks. So for all the mass timber elements for this 14-story building were less than 50 trucks. And then the evaluation is that comparing if it would have been built with concrete, it would have been roughly 270 trucks. So it's also emission savings in the logistics of the building materials. Then you might ask, so how high can you go with mass timber? So currently roughly 25 stories high is possible with CLTs or cross-laminated timber. Then for the kind of support structures, it could be even taller. And then also what was also Niels was mentioning this all the time, more buildings. So we are also sometimes we see cities expanding up instead of wider. So wood is a good material because it's light but really durable and strength. So you can also kind of build additional floors on top of existing buildings with this material. But maybe enough of bragging about this beautiful material that I of course love. But taking it then into kind of what is needed from industry perspective, from policymakers. So we are not alone in this construction sector, and buildings will need all of the materials. And we have seen lately so many nice movements in the construction sector by different players. What are they doing to decarbonize their actions? So I think we are all living this climate crisis and understand that everyone needs to move. But it's not going to be enough if it's only us companies doing the thing. We also need you, dear policymakers, to help us on this transition, basically. So from our part, we've been very happy and proudly taking part in World Green Building Council initiative about the whole life carbon policy roadmap. So with the national green building councils, this is very important work. And also that it kind of looks at the whole value chain, taking everyone on board. Because decarbonizing such a broad sector requires really actions from all the stakeholders in this. In this, we are basically together. And maybe if I take it to kind of two areas that I would have wishes or we would have hopes on the policy area. So first of all, Stora Enso, we believe that all the policies should really reflect this whole life carbon, and particularly this embodied carbon element of whole life carbon. Because when you think about the construction sector and buildings, many decisions